Are you thinking of a move to the greater Seattle area, but you're not sure if it's going to be right for you? Well, you are at the right video. Today, I'm going to tell you 7 things that you need to know that are the worst things about the greater Seattle area. And number 7 is the Seattle freeze. This is a real thing that locals and transplants both complain about, which is it's hard to make true real friends. Some of the theories behind it is that there is a high contingency of introverts that live here, that it was founded by a lot of Scandinavian countries who are more reserved. Another theory is that because of how our seasons are, our houses aren't built around the idea of sitting on your front porch and waving at people, I guess I would say, and people just kind of tend to scurry out to their job, scurry back to the house. And now with the traffic being how it is, getting back out of the house to go do something, you have to be like super motivated. That Seattle freeze and some of the difficulty that comes with moving here and making true, lasting, meaningful friendships, it can feel challenging. My advice is get into some hobbies and be patient and you'll make friends. But it is a little different from other areas. Now, I grew up here, so I have friends, and because of being in real estate, I make friends with my clients and things, but I have to admit that there is only so much time in the day. All right, number 6 is that the schools are hit or miss. There's some schools that are 5 out of 10 on the Great Schools website, and then there's 10 out of 10. So if the schools are really important to you, then I do recommend that you get onto Great Schools and look at the reviews there. There's also the county superintendent or the state superintendent website, which really digs deep and it talks about test scores and it breaks down the test scores, for math and English. It talks about the demographics. It talks about like the trending test scores. So like maybe you're looking and considering a school, but if you look at the trending scores, they're kind of dipping down. So that's just something to keep in mind while you're researching schools. And so even though in general we might say a certain school district is good, always research the specific schools that a home is in and make sure that you're comfortable with that if that is something that's important to you. Number 5, the traffic. I know I say it in almost every video, but the traffic here is terrible. Now, if you're from LA, you might say the traffic's amazing. You don't have to go 2 hours one way. I guess I've heard that in LA that's what it's like. I don't know. I grew up here, so I remember when there wasn't much traffic. And so now it's like, oh, the traffic. If you're coming from a place like Hawaii, I had a client that relocated here from Hawaii, and she was like, I don't want to drive more than 15 minutes because in Hawaii, if I drove 15 minutes, I could get to the other side of the island. So it's all about your perspective and what you already know, and you just need to decide what you're comfortable with. But the traffic, if you get frustrated easily, then you're going to want to keep that in mind. When I lived in downtown Bellevue, I remember that if I had someone that wanted to view a house in Snohomish County somewhere, I had to add an extra 20 minutes to my drive time just to get out of downtown Bellevue if it was near the end of the workday. It was so frustrating to me because I grew up on 2 acres in Linwood before Linwood was as big as it is. Of course, everything was before it was, right? And I grew up here, so it's changed a ton, of course. But yeah, the traffic is just crazy. The mass transit is they are building light rail. The challenge that I see with that is that our employment centers are like all over the place. Microsoft does have the connector bus system. Amazon has subsidized transportation systems. Something kind of cool that Bellevue is doing right now is like free Uber rides to move people around downtown Bellevue, which I think is pretty cool. So there's some different options, and if you ride a bike, you might love living very close to the center of wherever your workplace is, and then you can just bike to work. Keep in mind, there are a lot of hills here. So you're going to need to have some really good biking legs, depending on where you live. That was my number 5 thumbs down for the areas that if you want to be able to move along quite speedily during rush hour, it's not going to happen. So number 4 is the actual physical road condition. I swear, I don't know what's happening with the money. We have one of the highest gas taxes in the nation. We're actually 3rd highest in the nation for gas tax. You would think that our roads would be paved with gold. They would be smooth as silk. You would never feel a bump anywhere. I'm telling you, especially when we head out on Highway 2 to go camping, it's crazy. And I've heard plenty of people in downtown Seattle talking about, the potholes thing is annoying and it's here. Now here's a side note, if you do move here, you may be disappointed to see that there aren't a lot of named streets. There's a whole bunch of numbered streets. And I've had some clients that relocated that they indicated that they were like, oh, your streets are numbered. I don't like it. For me personally, I love having a numbered street because then I know if I've missed my mark. If it's a street that's got a name and, there's no logic to it all, I can maybe not be paying attention, zoom past it, and I wouldn't even know. Thank goodness for phone GPSs. So anyway, the road conditions here, physical conditions, not great. So number 3, and that is homelessness and public safety issue, especially in downtown city centers and especially in downtown Seattle. When I was growing up here, I would walk in downtown Seattle and I felt perfectly safe. It was very, very clean. I felt very proud to be in the Seattle area. I was really proud of how clean our streets were, how clean our highways were. I loved how clean our air was. It just felt good. The situation has changed. So depending on where you live, you're going to want to walk around a neighborhood and decide what you're comfortable with. I always recommend to people to check crime maps or like LexisNexis to check what the crime statistics are in an area. And when you do that, I also want you to do the same thing for where you live right now, because I have found that sometimes it looks a lot worse than it actually is, because a lot of times with the crime maps, they're showing like domestic issues. It's not a public issue, it's a domestic issue. So just something to help you keep things in perspective is to check the crime map for your area when you're doing your research. As an agent, I can't tell you what is safe and what's not safe. That's something that you're going to have to do some research on your own to decide where you feel comfortable. So number 2, the weather. The weather here can really be draining for people that especially have the seasonal affective disorder. Tell me in the comments what it is. I can't remember now, but it's SAD is basically it. And in the winter, the sun is rising after 7. It's setting just shortly after 4. It is dark for a lot of the day. You could be commuting to and from in the dark. It's gloomy. Now, this past December was not gloomy at all. It was sunny. It was like spring. Actually, flowers were starting to pop out. I'm sure they were shocked when we had our big giant freeze after that. But it can get gloomy and drizzly and rainy. And then speaking of the rains, you can experience flooding. A lot of the homes here need to have sump pumps in their crawl spaces to remove the water. You can end up with a totally mucky backyard because of the water and the runoff. And you actually need to be very conscious of where the water runs off your house and, making sure everything has proper drainage. And so the weather in the winter and the spring can really, really get you down. When I was growing up, we used to say summer started on the 5th of July, and I would almost figure that we're not going to be able to see the fireworks because of clouds on the 4th of July. And then here's a little bonus downside would be the big one. There could be a giant earthquake at some point. It isn't like other areas that experience big earthquakes all the time. We don't have hurricanes. We don't have tornadoes. We have little earthquakes, but the big one hasn't happened, but it could happen. And I don't know when it's going to happen, but it could. So there's your kind of bonus negative weather thing. And the number one negative about the greater Seattle area is the housing prices. They're crazy high. So for example, the average cost of rent in Seattle is $2,063. The average cost of rent in Everett is $1,875. And the average cost of a rental in Bothell is $2,700. So the average cost of a single family home for purchase is $891 in Seattle, $627 in Everett, and $990 in Bothell. And then when it comes to condos, the average in Seattle is $483. In Everett, it's $274, and in Bothell, it's $568,000. For perspective, the pricing is all over the map. If you want a townhome, no yard, you don't care about having a big garage, you're going to save more than if you say that you need to have acreage and it needs to have a detached shop. You know, it needs to be close in, because everything is relative, but I mean, it is expensive here. Our first house that we bought was in 1997, and it cost $200,000, and it was a split level. We were told was a horse acre, and at that time I wasn't in real estate, and so I thought a horse acre meant almost an acre. And then when we refinanced, we discovered we had 0.42 acres. Well, lesson learned. Look at your actual lot size. Long story short, that house today, we don't have it anymore, but that house today would sell for around $800,000. So prices have gone up, and income has not gone up that same amount. Well, except for engineers and the people relocating here. So that's the top 7 worst things about the greater Seattle area. And so check out some other videos for details on where you might want to live.